Before I do, also, I brought some donuts to celebrate last meeting of the year and holidays. If anyone wants some, please help yourself.
Thank you, Cora.
And with that, can we please have a call to order for the December 19th Water Commission meeting?
So the roll call, Commissioner Davis,
Here.
Commissioner Young, Commissioner Cooney,
Yes.
Vice Chair Keller,
Here.
Chair Snyder,
Here.
Councilmember Sneddon.
Here. Are there any changes to the agenda?
Chair, there are no changes to the agenda.
Is there any public comment about items not on the agenda?
Chair Snyder, we have no speakers for public comment.
We'll move to consent items. 2 consent items, meeting minutes and water agency updates. Any comments or questions on those before we move to approve?
Move to approve. Second.
We have no speakers for public comment on that either. All right, Commissioner Davis,
Yes.
Commissioner Cooney,
Yes.
Vice Chair Keller,
Yes.
Chair Snyder.
Yes. Next, we'll move on to our administrative items. We'll start with item 6A, the Water System Annual Report.
Good morning, Water Commissioners, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. As you can see, we have a new format for the annual report. It's a story map that the GIS team, the water system team, and our engineering team has helped put together. We're excited about it. We're really excited about the functionality built into it, and we're hoping to use this as a tool to be able to communicate what we do, how we do it, and some more of the details of what goes into operating our water system. And yes, I'm Matt Ward, Water System Manager, and I also have Ms. Ashley Shizo to present here today. We're going to be covering a few topics, primarily operations and capital improvement. Feel free to ask questions as we go through the presentation. There's a lot here. We're going to try to get through it all, but we're happy to have questions. And if there's no questions to start, we'll go ahead and get going.
Just a quick thing. So we have screens in front of us, but we're not seeing anything on the screens. I don't know if that's fixed.
It's okay.
It's okay. They're usually not up, so we don't have to use them, but just wanted to double check.
Sorry about that. We'll get going. And the format of this is similar to the past presentations, but you'll notice that it's going to flow a bit different. So as I scroll through, there's going to be a little bit of scrolling. And what we have right here is we have an overview of the 18 pressure zones that we have in our city. We have a T5, D5 water system, so most complex. And the color shades you see here represent the different pressure zones. You'll notice the black dotted line that runs along kind of the purple area about midway through the overview. That actually shows the sphere of influence of the Vic Trace Reservoir, including those other green, pink, and blue colors that are also served by Vic Trace. And approximately 70% of the community receives water from Vic Trace, which is going to be a major focus for us in this presentation, but also in the coming years as we ramp for that project.
A couple of questions. First, well, the pressure zones reflect the various elevations that we have, so that's what we mean. No? And then the other, so that's more common. And then the other one is the desal plant also covers the same region, or how does that work between? Well, desal's running.
It does, and that's a great point to make. We have our transmission system connected to the desal plant. So, and we currently move desal water to Vic Trace. So thanks for making that point. There is some blending currently, but in different modes of operation, especially in the future. Vic Trace will still serve as like a storage hub and support the desal plant as well as conveyance from Cater. I'm going to move along here. we have 16 pump stations, and those are typically where we have to move water to those higher elevations. And then typically closely located to those pump stations are our reservoirs, which serve as our storage throughout the system. Our 3 treatment facilities, our Cater Water Treatment Plant, Ortega Water Treatment Plant here in downtown, and then our desal plant just down the street next to El Estero. Things get a little busier as we demonstrate the over 27,000 service connections that we have, so meters. And as you can see, they're distributed throughout our entire service area. But I think one of the things that helps drive home just how big the distribution system is the network of pipes. One of the cool features of the story map is you can zoom in, you can zoom out. But really what I think conveys the message of just how long, if you were to align these mains end to end, it would stretch from Santa Barbara to San Francisco. So over 335 miles or 330 miles of water mains. Obviously, you're familiar with this image, but there's a component of the water system that we want to highlight, and our systems are designed around our sources of supply. So the complexity of our treatment and distribution systems are tied to the complexity of our overall water supply. Today, we'll be covering Gibraltar Reservoir and focusing on Cater water treatment operations and water distribution operations primarily. So our distribution team oversees Gibraltar. One of the main changes that's happened over time is, you'll recall and you're familiar with the pass-through agreement. And when I first started supervising operations, pass-through was the discussion. And so since pass-through has not become the future, really our perspective has had to change to operating this legacy asset. And so recognizing that, we've done some asset inventory work that we'll talk about for later in the presentation, but currently on a good year, Gibraltar supplies about 50% of water to the city, so extremely valuable asset. We've been studying the needs there. They're growing, and in part of that is due to regulation, which we'll cover further in the presentation, but really having to do with the structural elements of the dam. As we remember, the Oroville incident really drew attention to dams in general throughout the state, and a whole lot of requirements are being passed down, and so we're going to be talking about that some more, but yeah, it's getting busy at Gibraltar is the bottom line.
Madam Chair, just quick question. You passed over the pass-through agreement. Would I consider that inactive or dead?
It is active, but we have been stopped by the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. They do not want to take up our pass-through, particularly the Warren Act. We're waiting on the Warren Act. The pass-through agreement has been executed, and in order to fully recognize it, we need to have a Warren Act to be able to store Gibraltar water in Cachuma.
Right.
And the Bureau refuses to take up that until we complete a biological opinion or a biological update of the Cachuma project. And so we are in this holding pattern with no timeline at this point. And it's frustrating because it took us, I don't know, a good 3 or 4 years to get the Bureau to understand the pass-through agreement. And now all of those people have subsequently left the Bureau, and so it's going to be difficult to bring them back up to speed on what that means.
Thank you, Commissioner Davis, for the question. So things are getting busy. We do have almost two full-time employees that help operate the dam. One is our dam caretaker, Frank Deely. He's up there, resides there. We're looking at how we're going to manage the structure that he lives in. It's fairly old, and it's definitely in need of a full overhaul. And there's also these other facilities you see adjacent right here that support the dam and make sure that we can run power out there and then also house people temporarily when needed when the dam is spilling. So all of these assets are going to need some level of improvement. We're looking at water and power to the dam caretaker's house. Currently, it's supplied with some water from the reservoir, and we're looking at adding a well, and then also creating a solar array that will have a battery and be able to supply power to the house. It's currently run off a generator. And there's just going to be a lot of activity that, 5 years ago we weren't talking about as much, or further back, but it's really coming to a point where we definitely need to start to reinvest. But clearly the investment's worth it, and given the lifespan of this asset and the future of it. So Mission Tunnel helps connect the dots. It's almost a straight line through the mountains underneath 2,000 feet of mountain in some areas. And it's amazing once you go inside of it how straight it is. It's 3.7 miles long. You get about 2/3 of the way into it, and there's a slight pivot in it. So actually, I think that that number 3 dot right there actually reflects kind of about where that pivot's at. But it's just amazing to see how straight it was actually built and constructed over 100 years ago. And then coming over the mountain to our hydroelectric facility, and we're going to talk a little bit about the performance of that facility. It's been hugely helpful, something that we reinvested in over 10 years ago and has since been powering Cater on a regular basis when we have the supplies available. And we're looking at ways that we can maximize the use of that. And then the 4-bay Decatur Laurel Reservoir, which COMB operates, and we work with them to make sure we have supply in there, and we're balancing supplies between Cachuma and Gibraltar. And then just to the left of there, you can see Cater. And we're going to get into a little bit of the performance metrics for Cater that you're familiar with, but first, just showing the reach of Cater and how important it is to supply within our region. The JPA, as you know, they pay about 40% of the cost to operate Cater. Really important partner, and you can see that's reflected in the volume of water that we're conveying down south to our partner agencies.
Sorry, Goleta doesn't get any water from Cater?
They do, but not under a formal contract. We've got an exchange agreement with them in which they reimburse us. But interesting question that you asked, because this is one of the things we're tying in. We have interconnections with them, which I think every agency, that's good practices in emergency. The challenge with our Goleta connections is their customers rely on our connection, which isn't the intent there. The intent is to be able to, hey, you're doing some emergency work, or, but they have a pretty significant and consistent demand for water. And so that's one of the things that we're looking to sit down and talk to them about, because we do have this long-standing agreement with them related to the airport, which they provide water to the airport. And then, of course, we have some various overlap where we provide their customers, they provide some of our customers. Anyway, trying to clear up that document, which is quite old at this point, to kind of come up with a game plan, because I think any district or water system should be self-reliant and shouldn't be completely dependent on a neighboring agency. So we're working to kind of flush that out.
Yeah, and it's also a timely discussion because we're looking at doing a lot of water main work, and ultimately that the demands on that end of our system are important, and we'll discuss that a little further in the presentation. We got some good stuff coming ahead. But so these are the diversions for Gibraltar. We diverted about 5,600, a little over that acre feet. So we really maximized the use of Gibraltar Reservoir last year. In green, you can see the diversions directly from the reservoir. And in blue, 6% is a lot to come from the little diversions that we get out of Devil's Canyon. It was a really wet year, which lent itself to also an increase in intrusion water. And intrusion water really has doubled about since peak drought, so it's become a significant source of supply. So combined, it just rolls up just how important Gibraltar is and how much of a low-cost supply that we have. Then I'm going to let Joshua or Mr. Hagmark comment a bit on the energy production there, because we got a lot going on with the energy master plan.
Madam Chair, just a quick question. On the Mission Tunnel, so in a wet year, we get a lot more intrusion coming through the tunnel. Huh, I didn't know that. That's actually interesting.
Yeah, you may recall from years past, we did work closely with UCSB's
Right.
geology team, and they had been going through doing some carbon dating. And some of the older water in there is about 25 years old when it reaches the tunnel, so it had taken that long to kind of percolate down. And what they find in these wetter years is, of course, it just pushes water down faster into the tunnel as it's migrating down. So you got various veins that run through the tunnel, but it does pick up pretty substantially, and it's good quality water coming in. So, and of course, very little energy required to get it to us, and then of course it produces some electricity, which we're going to get into here.
Thank you, because you answered one of the questions was, how do you determine which water is from the Mission and what's from Gibraltar? So that's interesting. I've always thought that about 1,000 acre feet was what we used as kind of a planning tool for that.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And so 1,800 is a pretty
Pretty big,
significant
yeah.
jump, right?
Good, thank you.
Can I ask a question? Sorry. So just, I'm not sure I'm understanding this figure. It's diversions from what?
Gibraltar,
So that, this pie chart there is diversions from Gibraltar?
yeah.
And how do I know that from looking at that chart?
So it's kind of the roll-up of all the assets that connect Gibraltar Reservoir to Cater. And so at Gibraltar Reservoir in the green area, you'll see that's water that we're actually taking through the intake structure. Devil's Canyon, that diversion is actually turned into the tunnel, it's near the tunnel. So that water feeds into the tunnel, and then we have the intrusion water that infiltrates the tunnel. So by the time it gets to Laurel Reservoir, which that's the total volume of water captured from
Okay.
that asset, basically, or group of assets.
So just on the story map, is there a title or somewhere that it says that that pie chart is for Gibraltar?
We
or-
could probably update it and make it a
Yeah.
little more
just-
clear.
That's, I was just wondering, just if glancing at it,
Yeah.
how a
Yeah.
person would know. Okay, thank you.
I see where you're going with it, yeah. So, as noted in our past discussions, we've embarked on the energy master plan, and I thought this was kind of a really helpful as we kind of started to dig into energy production from Gibraltar Hydro, how that plays out. And so I thought this was kind of interesting. We had almost, 2 million kilowatt hours produced from the Gibraltar Hydro facility. Pretty substantial. And then you can see 1.3 million was used at Cater, and another 230,000 kilowatt hours was used at the South Coast Conduit Booster Pump Station. So that's to push water mainly down to Montecito and Carp. So you get a sense there that we can offset our power from hydro. Again, when that power is produced, how it's produced, we're going to tell a little story here. So next slide.
It may be better instead of a pie chart, because it's a little confusing, a histogram, just because it's not the entire pie. One is used in the other one, so just the pie chart is still, yeah.
Yes, and then, so this next one here kind of brings into it how much they cost and or generate. So the green here being how much we produced at Gibraltar Hydro, so a little over 200,000. However, at Cater, our charges were about 320,000 for water to run, or power to run Cater, and then another 70,000 for the South Coast Booster Pump Station. Part of that being, you obviously have transmission costs and generation costs when you're talking SCE charges. And then with Gibraltar Hydro, that is just what we're getting for generation, right? SCE is taking that power away in that case. And then we scroll down, you kind of see the unit costs, and that's where you also see kind of that disparity in transportation costs. So I bring this to your attention because as part of the energy master plan is trying to figure out how we can tie these dots together. And so some of the ideas are, can we put in a direct power line from Gibraltar Hydro to Cater? and then obviously maybe a battery in there. And then future long-term is their ability to put in valving automation that we could dial in Gibraltar deliveries so that water is delivered from 4 to 9 when peak power costs. So there's a lot of different things to play with here, but clearly you can see there's a financial incentive to go after. And so we got to look at what the capital costs would be for some of these projects and whether it would pay off. And then, of course, there are some rules with SCE about running private power lines and crossing the right-of-way, things like that, that we have to work through. But there is something here to work with, and this is part of the energy master, just an example of one of the elements of the energy master plan we'll be exploring.
I second the matter of bar charts.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we'll work on that. This is definitely a work in progress, first go, and
It's very nice.
done in spare time. But yeah, thank you for the feedback.
And the distance for that line is not very long, right? It's just the power plant, the hydroelectric plant is
Right, it's
right there, no?
maybe a quarter
Half a
mile,
mile,
quarter
quarter
half
mile?
mile. Yeah, it depends on how
It's
route.
just you have to go through the road.
Right. Right.
Don't get too
Because of
fancy
course
with
we
it.
have to work with, I should throw this caveat on there, we'd have to work with the Bureau if the power line is on their property, and that would require an act of Congress to approve utility lines on the property.
Yeah, Mr. Roebuck, previous Water Resources Manager, it was a Herculean effort to get us the property that the hydro plant's on, but times have changed, and it'll be interesting to re-engage on this subject. And moving on to water distribution, this is our cartograph operations maintenance system CMMS, and it'll take a second to load here, but we're real excited to be working in this environment with our new GIS team because there's a lot going on here, and there's a ton of functionality that we're going to be able to embed into active maps that our staff will be able to use in the field and help QC things. And obviously, this looks very busy, but what I think the message here is that this is just the water distribution staff, and they're out there every day having touch points with the community. This does not include our metering staff or our wastewater collection staff. So we have a lot of touch points with the community. This is just for last fiscal year, so 15,000 activities were performed, and it's impressive. Then we have a few highlights here. I'm going to toggle around a little bit, so bear with me as I move into some of our key performance metrics. And there's a story here. So if you turn some of that off, you can kind of see what we did last year. Now, 13% of our goal, which you can see here, obviously not great, but that was a strategic move. We've been struggling to maintain staffing levels for quite some time. We have 19 water distribution operators who make up the core work group that supports the city and all those different touch points that you saw. And we've had about 6 vacancies. It's a fluid environment, but we have overfilled, and we've got operators. We had a great recruitment, but it really means that we have to apply our resources to our highest priorities. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, capital is really coming to the forefront of what we need to do in order to restore the system. And so this was a strategic move. Now, we do monitor our water quality, obviously, and we take it very seriously. It is a very high priority. We do flush all of our dead ends annually, and we do that through a variety of means. But we have over 90 dead ends in our system, so that's just areas where a water main ends at the end of the street. And we're required to inspect our fire hydrants, all of them every 3 years. So we go through about a third of the system annually. And as you can see here in the data that we kind of are methodically moving through the entire system. And then you'll see some other work here that was done on an as-needed basis. And we met 97% of our goals. So we'll make that up in the next year, and we'll keep that on track. One of the reasons that this is, obviously, fire protection is important, making sure our hydrants are functional when we need them. So we need to stay on top of this, but also the International Insurance Standards Organization, thank you, ISO. What they do is periodically, I think it's every 3 years, they audit our system and they audit the firefighting capacity of our fire department. So we work very closely with the fire department because the ISO ratings impact insurance rates for all the city. So we work very closely with them. We usually score very well. The addition of the desal facility, for example, increased our resiliency, therefore improving our scores. We're currently going through an audit. We have passed along the information requested, and then we're hoping to meet and confer with them when they get back to us. It's a large organization, and the communication will be a little touch and go, but we'll hopefully be getting back together with them soon and understanding where we're at. So moving on to water main repairs, 45 breaks, water main breaks last year. That's actually a good number. It's trending in the right direction, which I'll get to. I know still not where we want to be, but we are definitely doing better than the national average. And the KPIs we've used in the past, the key performance indicators, this is one of them. There's other ways we can measure this too, by reducing the number of main breaks, but that's been very difficult in a very old system, but probably something we'll want to entertain. And just as a general comment about this entire system, having Cartograph allows us to set more goals. And so that's something that we're certainly wanting to do. The P3 program that the city previously had for tracking performance has changed to core goals, which focuses on kind of the higher level goals. But we've retained our P3s internally so that way we can set the standard. But that did kind of change the reporting. And I think with the change in the structure of the reporting up the chain, I think what we're going to do is we're going to probably try and add and continue to build more goals. So one of the things that we'll be coming back to Water Commission for is for approval to enter a contract with a consultant to help us really tool Cartograph to what we need as a water utility. Cartograph is used citywide. When we adopted it as OMS, it was adopted citywide, and we kind of got an out-of-the-box program, and we've maximized our use of it. But as you start looking at the data and the functionality that we currently have, there's definitely ways that we can be more strategic, and I think this next performance indicator helps drive that message home. Valve exercising. So I was looking at this yesterday as we were dialing in the final tweaks to the report, but it's interesting because if you look at this, I guess zooming back out, you'd say it looks like first we have almost 12,000 valves in the city, so this is actually 40% is our goal, our current goal, to exercise valves annually. Best management practice would be to do 100%, visit all of your valves every year, so that way you know that valves and easements aren't being buried, that all the street work that's happening, we don't lose a valve, and that we're actually exercising those valves so we can get the most out of the lifespan, especially in a time when we're investing heavily in our water mains. We want to be able to make sure that we maintain them so that way we can perform those shutdowns. The shutdowns go as planned. But we've had to reduce our goals in order to make sure that we can have a goal that we can try and motivate and get to. But what I found looking at the data and what I've been talking with staff, water distribution staff with is, how can we add some different filters or things so that way we can be really surgical, because at this point in time, we know when the valve was exercised, where that valve is located. There's a date, but sometimes we might have exercised it twice in the same year for what purpose? Was it for capital improvement? Was it part of preventative maintenance? Was it because there was a new development that was coming in and we had to perform a shutdown? But improving this environment will help us really understand how we're deploying the staff, and then we can start making informed decisions based on data as to how we want to deploy the the crews out to go and do asset management work, which is the overall goal to reduce the risk by understanding what you have, what's the condition of it, and how often you should be maintaining it.
I have a quick question. Are there options for automation with valve exercising?
Great question. We're actually working on, for larger diameter valves, that's certainly a really important component of making sure that you have resiliency, that you have control in place, and being able to remote locate or remote actuate valves is certainly an important thing, and that's been at the kind of forefront of the industry as we started talking more about resiliency, making sure that you're prepared when there is, an earthquake, something like that. But at the smaller line valve level, like water main grid level, 16-inch and below, it's not really financially feasible. But we are looking to add some automation in certain areas.
So Chair Snyder, to kind of add to that, when our staff go out to exercise these valves, we do have valve actuators on our trucks. So 2 of our trucks are equipped with these. It measures the amount of torque it took to close the valve and how many rotations. And that's something we keep track of as well. So we know when we go out there, okay, it should be 25 turns to close this valve. And it also keeps you from accidentally twisting off the valve or damaging it. And so we can quickly assess, hey, there's something wrong with this valve. We're not going to go shut down. We can now put it on the list to be repaired or replaced, depending on what type of valve it is. So we're gathering a lot of information on this, but it's one of those hidden parts about operating a distribution system that really helps for example, when you have a main break, ideally you have a valve at each intersection, you're shutting off one block and you're notifying. It's when that one of those valves does not work and now becomes a 4-block shutdown. Now your impact is much more significant, and hopefully now you have all those other valves. Hopefully all of those valves close, because if they don't, it continues to expand. So it's just really important that we stay on top of our valve maintenance. It's kind of one of those things that doesn't get a lot of attention except by our staff who know how important those shutdowns are.
Yeah, and operating an aged system, the valves are typically 50 years old oftentimes, and there's a tremendous amount of skill. Might seem simple, but operating a buried valve, just turn it, it's off or it's not. But there's actually ways that we're able to even operate the old valves to apply torque using equipment and exercise them several times. And it's actually pretty impressive to watch a skilled operator do it, because you're putting over 400 pounds of torque on a valve, and as it's creaking, you're kind of like, oh, you don't want to break it. But if you do it just right, then you get the shutdown. You minimize the shutdown. The difference that it makes is that you can keep 2 to 4 blocks in service where you might not have been able to without that skill set. So a lot goes into it. I kind of drilled in here a little bit. I was looking at this and trying to figure out if it was preventative maintenance or what was being done. And so the reason this looks so busy, and I'm telling you that we only did 40% of the system, is also because there's fire hydrant valve exercising versus grid valve exercising. So there's a lot of different things happening there when some of the hydrant inspection work is also contributing to this higher number. But again, looking at the system holistically, how can we improve it? How can we make sure that we can deploy our staff as efficiently as possible, and they know what they see in the field is accurate geospatially. So as I wrap up here for treatment and distribution, a few major initiatives is really staffing is at the core of our focus. We have experienced very high turnover for a long period of time. We've done a lot of prep work for class and comp, which is great because we feel like that study that's been ongoing for the last few years, that we're prepared for it. We're structured in a way that will work well in that future model. But we've hired a lot of new staff, and so we're really working with the whole team to update our training programs. We've invested a lot in training staff because it's really critical that we have these skilled staff. So that will continue to be an ongoing thing. And then we're also going to be focusing a lot on staffing levels for capital improvement. So we developed the water distribution infrastructure plan back in 2019. We've got some design elements already in motion, But in order to design things well, you need to have the operations team set up in order to, and involved from the very beginning to make sure that the planning work's done so that when you hand it off to the designers, they've got a good scope of work and that everything goes efficiently. So as we're now starting to ramp towards implementing the water distribution infrastructure plan, we're bracing ourselves for increased capital, which we're 100% committed to. And we're going to be working to deliver those projects as efficiently as possible. So, and just to highlight, one of the sad things about, moving to a more data-driven environment is sometimes you miss the human element. I wish I would have mentioned it when we started the presentation because I absolutely love the photo there. I'd scroll back to it, but I want to keep this going, and maybe we'll finish up there. But there's a couple of our crew members there working on a break, restoring some service connections. Won't mention the Dodger hat. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Saijo, Principal. Oh, sorry. Thank you for reminding me. I got a little ahead of myself. One last thing, just a touch point. The reinvestment's working. So we're seeing the number of breaks go down. There's the national average is this green bar you see here. So we are seeing the benefit of reinvesting in these assets. And ideally, we would drive these down, to really historic lows because, as you well know, the city is developing at a very increased rate. And so it's really important that we have our pipes ready to connect for the development community and community as a whole, and then also just create that reliability that the ratepayers expect, as they should, to have reliable service.
I'm just going to add, there is the human component to this too. The more main breaks that we have, the harder it is on our staff, honestly, especially when majority of them do not live here in town, have to come in for these breaks. And so being able to get these down, not only is it lowering the impacts to our customers, reducing costs related to emergencies interruption, but it also improves the working environment for our staff who can focus more on preventative maintenance rather than running around fixing breaks. So really important. And again, it does depend on the age, and we do have an older system. Ventura, for example, their main breaks are less than 20, but they also have a much younger system. Their problems are further out, but unless they stay on top of it, right? That's the whole thought process here. And so that makes a difference when our staff are looking at it, going, well, how many night times am I going to have to come in and work? Sure. It really makes a difference. So,
for reference, I believe I heard Goleta had 0 breaks last year. So very different operating environment. It's because they have asbestos pipes, so they have an old system too, but just a little different material. Maybe it's going a little bit longer, but they'll be in this same. Every agency, as you can see by this national average, is up against this challenge, which does create a lot of competition for resources. And just right before I pass the torch here to Ms. Saizo, I want to just give some credit to all the staff who contributed to this report. It was a lot of different people trying to put things together under tight deadlines, under dealing with a lot of emergencies, as well as planned work that's hitting the city. So just credit to the IT group and the water distribution team, as well as treatment and engineering. And with that, I'll pass the presentation over.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Ward. I'm Ashley Saizo, Principal Engineer with the Public Works Department. I oversee our Water Resources Engineering team, and we are responsible for delivering the water and wastewater capital programs and supporting both water and wastewater with their operational needs as well. But of course, today we're focused on the water system. And so I'm going to start with showing this dashboard and starting with water main replacement, building off of what Mr. Ward has discussed and emphasizing the importance of our water main replacement program. It has become a very large focus for our team. And this graphic is showing water main miles completed by project. It's not necessarily by fiscal year, although we do have some projects that are named by fiscal year. So the key takeaways from this graphic are we have completed a large amount of work over the last several years, over 15 miles of main replacement. And we have, trying to get that to go away for you. We have a lot of work that is either in construction or about to go into construction. And you can see with some of the work a little bit farther out, we have a huge amount of replacement planned and on in the queue for getting out to construction over the next several years. And the work is spread all throughout the city, all areas of the city. And we do have a goal of replacing 6 miles of main per year. We have been struggling to meet that goal for a number of reasons. One of the reasons is that we've been focusing on replacing mains with the highest consequence of failure, and that tends to be our larger diameter pipe. And those projects are more complex, they're more expensive, which means that our dollars don't go as far. But we have made great progress in addressing some of those large diameter vulnerabilities. And we do have, and I'll get into more detail on some of the key priority locations as I go through the presentation. Some of the other reasons why we've struggled with meeting the goal, of course, going back to COVID, we did have to delay and put projects on pause. And then coming out of COVID, there were major supply chain issues with getting materials, which further delayed projects. And just most recently, last fiscal year, we had a big project all packaged up, put it out to bid. We were excited to get started, and we did have a bid protest on that bid, and ended up having to reject all bids. And we ended up repackaging that into a slightly smaller project and put that back out to bid, and that work is going to be starting in January. And I'll be highlighting some of those key locations here as I go through the presentation.
May I ask a
And just kind
question?
of, oh, sorry, I was just going to fill in. We spend about $17 million, or budget $17 million a year for water mains. So this is a huge portion of the budget.
Madam Chair, may I ask a question about the previous graph? So if it has on it fiscal year 21 or 23, does that mean those projects are completed? Okay.
Yes, the Councilmember Sneddon, I should have mentioned, the projects shown in the dark gray color are completed. And these projects are typically broken into 2 contracts. So the FY19 project had 2 separate contracts. We call them A and B contracts. So that was the work completed with that project. This was, I believe, the FY20 project, which was also 2 contracts, and then FY21 was A and B, and that work was wrapped up last fiscal year.
Thank you. So if I want to read this and see, so say I see my street highlighted on there, and it's highlighted under FY23.
Yes.
It's on the blue. Do I read that as this has been budgeted for but hasn't occurred yet, or that it's occurred because it was fiscal year 23, or just how
Thank
to
you,
read it?
Councilmembers.
And by the way, this is phenomenal, this switch over to the story map, and there's so much information that you're distilling for us. So these are just little questions, not the whole presentation is fabulous.
Thank you, Councilmember Sneddon, for the question. The FY23 project, although it's named FY23, is the project that's just about to go into construction.
Okay.
So this project is budgeted, the contract is encumbered, and we will be getting started in January. And I'm going to highlight the locations as part of this project.
So any member of the
Text
public,
slides.
if they're looking on this and they see that their street is highlighted but is not gray, that means it's planned, and when it's completed, it'll be in the gray bar?
Correct.
Thank you so much.
Yes, we're showing planned work. This green bar is showing key priority locations that have been identified but aren't necessarily scheduled or part of a project quite yet. But these have been identified, and will, as we move forward, we'll be packaging those up into contracts.
I really appreciate the commission's interest in this, because this is one of the areas we want to continue to develop, breaking it down by fiscal year and showing kind of what we plan to do, even doing some level of forecasting, because we're doing a lot of coordination with streets, so we get in there before they pave, that kind of activities. So some things do move around, but yeah, trying to give a better sense, because there's so much going on behind the scenes as we try to plan out these efforts and work with our other partners in the right-of-way.
And also with this planned work, it's stuff that's in the horizon. We've got so many competing interests going on, starting obviously with wanting to make sure that the system's resilient. And so it's constantly trying to balance all the different interests between the various capital work going on with streets, transportation. Private development is obviously a big one. And then things break. So we've, as you see these projects on the left in the bar chart, those are smaller but important, really important to get done. Some of them are being triggered by the Highway 101 widening project, where we have to move our stuff, it's a requirement. So a lot of different things happening here, and we're going to get into some of like the specific locations, because we are really excited about being able to showcase kind of the why behind all of this and the prioritization that's happening.
Thank you. So I'm going to move into highlighting water main work that we have in construction currently, or moving into construction here shortly. And I'll start with Portezuelo, and that is highlighted in item number 1. We started construction in November, and this was driven by a recent pretty significant water main break in the area. The neighborhood is 1950s cast iron, and the break did a significant amount of damage to the pavement. The structural section for those streets is substandard and was on a steep slope. So when the break occurred, it did cause significant damage to the pavement. And in bringing the team together with operations and engineering and looking at how best to address this, there was a concern that if we made the expensive pavement repair, that this line is compromised and there could be additional breaks, which would then trigger further pavement repairs. So rather than be reactive in that way, the team came together and was able to put this on our on-call contract, construction contract, to move this into construction really quickly.
And this is one of those ones we accelerated, and I know Commissioner Davis has seen this firsthand. When we get into some of it's not on all steep streets, but in some areas, the topography on that, when it breaks, instead of coming to the surface, it will travel underneath the asphalt, basically popping it up, and you end up, here's your main break, but you end up buying half the street because of how the water actually got to the surface. And so this is one of those neighborhoods that's particularly susceptible to that. So getting in there as soon as we could, I think this is definitely not the first time it's broken this neighborhood, but it was the last time we were going to want to deal with that. So trying to get this knocked out quickly.
We have made some staffing requests that help support the planning that we hope to achieve. So locating all these areas throughout the city helps us build the different attribute tables that we need in order to map it out and then help do more neighborhood replacements. But it's obviously you only have so many linear feet you can replace, but the more information we have, the better off we are, and it helps the entire city really with the streets team and the transportation team understanding where the water team's going. So it's a powerful tool.
And so this is cast iron, it's been replaced completely to PVC or something like that, or is it a repair?
No, this is a new line, completely new line, yes. Next up, starting construction January 6th is kind of mid-State Street between Valerio and Junipero. And this is part of that FY23 water main replacement project that's going into construction. Cast iron, again, installed in the early 1900s. We do have a break history along this line, and it is a large diameter, varies typically 12 to 14 inches through this area. So the consequence of failure for those larger lines is greater. And part of what drove the timing for this project is an upcoming street lighting project that will be coming in behind us. So it's definitely a big theme throughout all this work is coordination with our streets and transportation teams and making sure that we can sequence the work appropriately. So this work is starting in January, and then the street lighting project will come in once our work is complete. Also starting construction in January is De La Vina, and this is from Mitchell Terrena up to Constance. And again, early 1900s cast iron, and one of the primary drivers for this location is a significant pedestrian safety improvement project along this entire corridor. So again, speaking to the coordination and collaboration with our streets and transportation teams. In this case, we actually combined our bids into, our projects into one bid set. So it was, went out as one contract, and that was awarded at council, I believe, in early December or late November. So this project will be getting started in January, beginning with the water main work. So both De La Vina and State Street will be under construction with water main work at the same time, coming in January.
I do want to say this was kind of an experiment. This sounds great to put it all together into one project. It was kind of a nightmare, like trying to get everybody on the same page, and I actually think it, for water, it wasn't necessarily a great thing. The costs that we got under this project weren't what we were hoping for. So in looking ahead, as much as that sounds great, and I think and this is the challenge is weighing this, to the public it may be less inconvenient because we'll have the same contractor basically working the space, but I think we would have been better off getting in and replacing the main a year ago, and then the contractor coming through now to do all the paving and safety improvements. The challenge is you're now interrupting our customers twice. And so we're in that constant discussion of how do we minimize that. But I think we did, unfortunately in this case, pay a premium for the water main replacement, incorporating it into this project.
With that, we are trying a lot of different contracting methods. Council passed recent measures to change the way that or give us more tools to contract. Going back to Portezuelo, that was an on-call contract, and we actually received excellent pricing on that work. And so we are working also, again, though, with streets and transportation to restore the entire right-of-way there. And the sequencing, I think, will work well for that particular neighborhood. Obviously, there are a lot more businesses in other areas, so we have to take different considerations into place. And on-call doesn't necessarily work in every part of the city, but it's definitely looking like a very viable tool that our contracting community is embracing, and the price is a signal of that.
Thank you. Moving on to location number 4, Lucinda Lane neighborhood. This is slated to start construction in the summer. It'll follow the State Street work under that contract. 1950s cast iron, and there is repeated break history in this neighborhood, which is why it was identified as a priority and incorporated into this project.
I want to comment on that too. That was an output of our replacement planning model. So it's been when you saw that green bar that we were talking about planned work, this was flagged through our replacement planning model, which we're working with Utah State or in Colorado State. Thank you. We were previously working with Utah State. Colorado State to develop a model that takes advantage of AI. So this was something that's actually been planned, and now it's going into construction. So it's showing that some of the various inputs that we have are turning into fruition.
And then the final location that is incorporated into this contract that is getting started is APS. And this is from Overlook over to, I believe, De La Guerra. This is going to be a challenging portion of work. It is a large diameter pipe, and the pipe that this is replacing has actually been out of service for quite some time because of a major break that happened in an easement on a steep slope and near the creek. So this has been a high priority for getting back into service so that we can restore full functionality in that portion of our service area. And again, break history, consequence of failure. There will be a new bridge crossing at the bridge on APS at Sycamore Creek. That'll be going in on the downstream side of the bridge.
And one comment on that main is it does serve everything east. There's only two large diameter pipes that serve everything east of Sycamore Canyon, basically. So the other pipeline is on Foothill, but it is a critical fee line. We had to turn it off. Not what we wanted to do, but it takes a few years sometimes to design these things and actually get them into construction and make them fit into the financial picture. So super important project, but just the consequence of failure, again, being a key driver.
All right, now I'm going to touch on a few high priorities in design. Don't have time to go through all the locations that we have on the books, but wanted to highlight first Cliff Drive. Again, speaking to the coordination with our streets team, this work is expected to start in the fall of 2025. And this was already identified as a need for water main replacement, but the schedule has been accelerated due to a very large multi-use path and pedestrian project that is going to be going into construction. The streets team got a very large grant to move forward with this project, so we've been working really closely with them. The existing main is 1920s cast iron and is in conflict with much of the proposed hardscape improvements, so it's important for us to get in, replace this line in advance, and we do plan on contracting this separately from the streets work. And then an additional benefit of getting this work done ahead of the Vic Trace Reservoir project is that we'll be hardening the system in this area before going into construction for Vic Trace. Moving on to the State and Hope area, this has become a very high priority for the city in looking at the significant redevelopment of the La Cumbre Plaza parcels and the proposals that are coming in. And this is 1950s and 60s infrastructure in this area, and the importance for the city to harden our system in the surrounding area for the developers to connect to. And we've been taking a really close look at how we can strategically plan for relocating mains into the right-of-way and eliminating pipelines that are on private property and will be in conflict with the development proposals.
This area has also been heavily impacted by water main breaks. On the public mains on private property, we've had numerous breaks inside that campus. So strategically, getting out of that private property is a good position for the city to be in. And we do have to consider ahead of the project likely strategies for replacing the water mains all around it, so we have sound pipes to connect to. A lot of the water main that you see kind of going up and along Hope Avenue, that's all USBR main that we inherited from them, and so it's 22-inch large diameter pipe. We're hoping to downsize it, but it's had numerous breaks over the years, and when it does break, it impacts a large area. Obviously, tons of business there, but this water main also does convey across Highway 101 and then does serve in our partnership with La Cumbre Mutual, also Glida Water District. So this is a really, the project won't look exactly like how it's drawn up right here, but it will be a significant lift and important one for us, so it's kind of our top priority.
Question. If I read this right, and you had mentioned it briefly, in the La Cumbre Plaza area, that's all on private property. It loops through the shopping center. And since we don't have a specific plan as we know what's coming, right, how are we planning out where to replace the line?
I think I can help answer that question. So we know that there's portions of the main that's serving parcels that are not up for development, kind of that box you see in the center there.
Not up for development right now.
Right now, yes. Thank you for saying that, because everything's going up, right?
Yeah.
However, we've been working with the developers as they're submitting, and we're making progress on ultimately abandoning some of those mains in there and having them connect. And so the benefit to the city is that we're not having to replace those pipes in those locations where they could be putting pavers in over things, covering assets, and then we're liable. And so we've made progress with the developer, but we're thinking how the sequencing of all this is going to work. We just met with the Public Works Director yesterday to kind of start talking about this from the high level. We have a need to replace the pipes around these, clearly. So we think there's a way that we can find a win-win where we can manage the amount of investment we have to make and be strategic in setting it up for what may come. But certainly the pipelines around that, we've identified them, and we're working closely with the applicants as they kind of.
To a large degree, I would see that they would have to basically follow our lead, meaning you replace this pipe, if they want to come in and do something different, they're going to have to do that on their own dime.
Yeah, fortunately, a lot of the uses on site are going to be residential.
Yeah.
So, but we do have to take into consideration the capacity element, which right now we do have capacity on the water side. Wastewater is a little more complicated. But we're kind of doing that dance, of being able to make sure that we're sizing everything right, sequencing things right, that we're ready to go. And obviously, the amount of construction that's going to happen on this site is going to impact the community greatly. So ideally, if we can do the work we need to do in advance, then we would be happy to do that.
And I think the other one that we're working through on this particular site is just the density. It's not something that's we're typically see between Sears and the Macy's property. It's about 1,000 units is being proposed, and with that kind of density, a single water connection is probably not a sound idea. And so we're kind of working through it because it's really the developer's discretion right now, unless we maybe take something to Water Commission and Council to change that, kind of limiting how many connections can be, how many customers can be on it. Because if you have to take a street out and need to take, 500 units out, that's an enormous. But if we can require maybe that the developer put in multiple connections off of several streets, that way they can continue to provide them even if we have to take a street down to do normal maintenance, valve replacement, that kind of stuff. So
Thank you.
exploring that kind of, these new issues that come out of this really dense development.
Hey, just editorial comment. This is one of the reasons I really thought the specific plan for this area would have been a great idea. And I understand all the machinations which went into killing that idea. It's unfortunate in that regard. But again, if the city's going to make that much investment here, then the private property is going to have to conform to that to a large degree. Thank you.
Are there regulatory requirements around how many, residences can be on a single connection?
No. We just haven't come across, our typical development here of the 20 units, that would be pretty big, 30 units. So this is a new challenge. And so we're kind of working through what kind of maybe changes we need to make to the municipal code so that we can set ourselves up for success if this is, we might anticipate more of these large projects coming down.
Have you looked at, or are there best practices from denser cities around kind of what it looks like in places that do have denser developments?
That's exactly where our conversation was going. We're not the first ones to do this. What's Vegas do? What is downtown LA doing? How are they handling these type of developments? And see if we can learn from what they have.
All right, moving on to the last location in design that I'm going to highlight, which is Stanwood Drive, which is also State Route 192. This is a large diameter line that crosses through private property on easements, and it's also within Caltrans right-of-way, which adds another layer of complexity. So this project is just going into the design phase. And our goal is to get this line into the roadway and outside of those easements to limit our exposure in those areas. It does have a large consequence of failure and a break history along this line. And this is going to be a complex project to design and to construct. It's likely to be pretty expensive, having to conform to Caltrans requirements. So we're getting started on this. It'll be a few years before this is ready to go into construction. All right, I'm going to shift gears and talk about CIP at Gibraltar and then go into some other capital projects. I know we're running a little bit long, so I'm going to try to go through this fairly quickly, and Mr. Ward set up the work at Gibraltar really well with his comments earlier. So I will jump right into it, starting with the log boom replacement project. And I know this is a lot of text for you, so I'm going to just skip through and I'll give you the highlights. In January of 2023, with that historic storm event that occurred, there was existing log booms were damaged during that storm when a large amount of debris was flushed into the reservoir, and it actually broke the log booms and pulled them through the gates. And so we mobilized quickly for an emergency repair and an assessment of the gates. Thankfully, there was no damage done to the gates, but we mobilized with Cushman Contracting under an emergency purchase order. They did some very immediate repairs to try to get something back in place for the rest of that rainy season, which worked well. But then we moved forward with a full replacement of the log boom system and worked with Cushman, and they fabricated a new system, and we were able to get that in place before last year's rainy season. That was a big feat for the team. Was with the operations team, the engineering team, the contractor, of course, the dam caretaker and assistant caretaker all pulled together to get that work done. There is one remaining item of work, which is to attach a new anchor to the dam face, and that's being fabricated, and then we'll have to wait, depending on how much rain we get this season, for the reservoir levels to drop next fall to be able to install that anchor. That'll be the last piece of that project. But so far, it's working really well. It has improved the protection to the dam and has really improved the operations for the operations, the functionality for the operations team, and being able to adjust the level of that system as the reservoir levels fluctuate throughout the year. Next, we have a project that is evaluating the vintage 1922 concrete on the 4 spillway bays. This was identified by the DSOD as part of a routine inspection, and so the city has undertaken that assessment with a consultant who is performed some coring of the spillway bays in September, and with those results, they will be proceeding with recommendations for design, and then once that is approved, those recommendations are approved by the DSOD, we'll be moving forward with that design, and then construction, which we always have to time with when there's no water spilling through the spillways. And then lastly, out at Gibraltar, as Mr. Ward was pointing out, there is a significant amount of need out at this facility. So we've been going through a comprehensive inventory of all of the existing assets, and that is nearly complete. And we plan on using that to inform capital planning and programming going into the future and being able to more actively manage those assets. And a key piece of that is looking at the caretaker's facility. So this is where our dam caretaker lives, and planning on doing a facility master plan for his home and adjacent facilities. Again, looking at a new well as a potable water source and some solar power and battery backup so that we can get that home off of generator power, and a significant overhaul of that house is needed as well. All right, moving into other highlighted capital projects. I did want to mention, this is just a small snapshot of all of the capital work that's underway. Just to put it in context, our team is managing about $244 million in active capital just for water alone. So it's a significant amount, and as Mr. Ward alluded to, we are making some staffing requests to be able to support this ongoing increased level of capital investment that's needed. So I'm going to start with the desal product water pump station upgrades. So this project is nearly complete. It's a project down at the desal plant to install higher powered pumps to give the city the ability to pump water through the newly installed conveyance main pipeline and up to Cater through connecting to the existing transmission main. So these are the new pumps that have been installed, and we're waiting on some last final electrical components to be delivered so that we can begin commissioning and startup testing. The transmission main renewal Phase 1 project is about to start construction in the field in January as well. And this pipeline picks up where the conveyance pipeline tied in to the existing transmission system at the intersection of Mission and Garden. And this is a kind of cool photo of the valving that was put in place to connect the new conveyance main. This is a 24-inch line with the existing transmission system. So the transmission renewal project is not doing a full replacement or rehab of the entire pipeline, but replacing valves, appurtenances, removing things that are no longer needed to harden that pipeline in preparation for conveying desalinated water all the way up to Cater.
Just quick, again, refresh my memory. Is that going to serve both ways, or is it? Yes. Simple answer is yes. Thank you.
All right, and then in design, another important part of our distribution system is our Sheffield pump station, which is located up on Foothill Road near the Santa Barbara Tennis Club. And this project is focusing on replacing the electrical and control systems within this pump station to ensure long-term reliability of this pump station that helps serve a large portion of our service area. We do have a second phase of a transmission main renewal project, and this will be similar work to replace valves and other key appurtenances on the transmission line that leads up to the Victrace Reservoir. And this work needs to take place before Victrace can be taken offline for that reservoir replacement project to ensure continuous operations of that transmission line while Victrace is out of service during construction. And then, of course, Victrace reservoir replacement. We were able to kick off design planning efforts for this project, and we're moving into design. We have a preliminary design report that is under review by the city currently, and as most of you are fully aware, this is the city's largest reservoir, serves about 70% of our service area. And so this will be a major project. We're going to be replacing the reservoir with two 5 million gallon. It's one 10 million gallon reservoir currently, replacing it with two 5 million gallon tanks that will be buried. And there's going to be a lot of activity with this project starting out in the new year with really getting started on community engagement in early 2025, and also starting the environmental review process with an EIR, which will be a robust environmental process to get environmental clearance. And then moving forward with design, engaging boards, commissions, and the public throughout that entire process. We have about 30 public touch points scheduled throughout the design process leading up to construction. And we are anticipating to start construction in the spring of 2028. And then finally, the Cater Finished Water Reservoir Resiliency Project. This will construct a new 2.5 million gallon chlorine contact basin at the Cater Water Treatment Plant. And this will, before I move into that, because that's more fun. This is going to eliminate a single point of failure currently at our finished water reservoir and allow us to take the existing reservoir offline to do structural and seismic upgrades and allow for routine maintenance going into the future by having that backup. And this is kind of a fun graphic that we've been playing around with to show this is what it looks like currently, and in the future, the blue outline is showing where the new reservoir, buried reservoir, will be located.
One other comment about this project. One of the great things about this project is that it's going to also add storage to Cater, which will allow us to avoid temporary storage at Vic Trace. So great trade-off. You get resiliency added at the hub, you get more storage, and then offset some other costs that you would have at Vic Trace.
And that concludes our presentation, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Just want to make a comment that this is like the exemplary cutting edge example of what to do with a story map, and like just bravo for embracing, and so much work goes into creating each one of those layers and then making it accessible, understandable, transparency wise. This is an incredible tool, and just what you've done with it and how you've been able to present it really highlights all that incredible, phenomenal amount of work that your whole department is doing year round. I mean, you really laid out huge projects, small projects, and all the interrelation of them, and just really thank you. Well, really well done.
Yeah, second that. Any other comments or questions? Okay, and I don't think there's a vote on this item, so thank you.
Public comment.
Oh, any public comment?
Chair Snyder, we have no speakers for public comment.
Okay, thank you.
People are missing out.
I know, right? I'm going to take a 2-minute break for donuts and bathroom if we want to do that, and then we'll move on to the item 6B.
Perfect.
Water Supply Management Report.
All right. Chair Snyder, Councilmember Sneddon. Going to kick this off. We've been talking a lot about water supply over the last month, 2 months. And we've got this annual report that we need to do as part of our involvement in the State Water Project. And it is a fantastic summary. The report is attached as well. I've asked Ms. Showers to kind of move somewhat quickly through it, but we would be happy to stop at any point and have a detailed conversation on this. Just want to be sensitive to your time and where you're interested, if there's elements that we specifically want to spend time on. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Showers to walk you through it.
Good morning, Chair Snyder, Commissioners, and Councilmember Sneddon. My name is Jasmine Showers, and I'm here with just a PowerPoint, not a story map. Sorry. For the outline today, we're doing an annual water supply management report, and we'll briefly talk about the purpose of the report, as well as a brief overcap of water year 2024 and water supply outlook, since we just spoke about those items last month. This report goes over important supply planning issues and some capital projects, groundwater findings, and then there is a recommendation at the end. So to touch more on the purpose of this report, this is a backwards-looking report. It goes over water supplies used in last water year, which again is from October 1st through the end of September. And this is a requirement as part of our participation in the State Water Project. As the final EAR requirement, the city agreed to show that our groundwater basins are not in overdraft conditions. And so part of what we'll do today is make a finding that the groundwater basins are in long-term balance. Starting with a brief water year 24 recap, and then what's happened so far at the beginning of this water year. As we spoke about last month, all of our local water supplies received over 156% of normal rainfall last year. And a reminder that this is the county water year, which is a month different. So it goes from September through the end of August. And so far in water year 25, so that would be 3 months, our local supplies have received less than an inch of rain. And as you may remember when I shared the temperature predictions and the precipitation predictions, we have equal chances of above or below precipitation, so there's still time to receive rain. And this is touching on the planned versus actual production. On the left is water year 24, and then within that left graph, the left line is total planned production, and the right is our actual production. And then the different colors are the supply mix. And so last year, we were able to use more Gibraltar Reservoir and Mission Tunnel water than we were expecting, and that allowed us to bank some carryover water at Cachuma. And so far for water year 25, and then this is moving back to the city water year, so we have 2 months here, we're seeing a similar trend where we're able to use more Gibraltar Reservoir water than we were expecting. And this is an image from the 2020 Enhanced Urban Water Management Plan. It's the adaptive management graph. And then on the y-axis is the different total demands in acre feet per year. And then on the x-axis are the percent supply reductions we might be. That's if the state said we needed to cut 10 or 20%, for example. And then where those two things meet are different phases of management. And the city is comfortably still in phase 1. And this is really good news. When this graphic was developed, it was expected that we would be in phase 2 by water year 24. So it's really good news. And phase 1 includes monitoring demand and supply, enhancing our existing supplies, and then operating the desalination plant. For the water supply outlook, this is a summary that I shared last month. The city can meet demands for the next 3 water years, even if we assume very dry conditions. We do not plan to pump groundwater at all. We do want to maximize our San Roque well aquifer storage and recovery, or the ASR injections. We do not plan to use state water project the next 2 years. And then we have planned in about 1,600 acre feet use in '27 if needed. And this is back to the favorite graph. This is showing water supplies to meet demand from 2012 to 2027. And the last 3 bars are actually the projected use. And the total height of the bars represents the total amount of water used. And then based on feedback from last month, we did add in for the different colors, the total amount of acre feet used per water supply. So hopefully make that clearer. Oh, thanks. So 2024, again, is our last actual use bar. And then we plan to meet demand using a combination of Cachuma, Gibraltar, Mission Tunnel, and desalinated water. And then you'll see that in that orange, that 1,600 acre feet of state water. And next, I'll talk about important supply planning issues and some capital projects. Our supply planning issues, a lot of these are on the federal level or the state level, and things move very slowly. I found this document, or this report from 1905 called Water Problems of Santa Barbara, California, just to kind of illustrate that we're moving on a long timeline. The Cachuma Project State Water Rights Order, the last state water rights order was issued in 2019, so we're in the implementation phase. And the Cachuma Project Biological Opinion, as Mr. Hegmark mentioned in the last presentation, we're still waiting on that, and staff continues to be involved with our JPAs on that. The Cachuma contract, starting in 2020, instead of negotiating a long-term contract, it started going into 3-year contract extensions, and we're currently in the second extension, so the second year of the 3rd year, so that'll be up in 2026. And we don't expect a new negotiation on a long-term contract until that biological opinion is finished.
We're taking bets on when this might be. 2030, 2020?
There's no real change on the Gibraltar pass-through operations effort. The state water project for the Delta Conveyance Pipeline, that was passed by DWR last December. And now the DWR is dealing with all of the permits needed. So there's state and federal permits for that project. And there's no real update on the contract assignment or reassignment to CCWA or the 2021 legal action against the county. The first capital project here related to water supply was covered in detail in the last presentation. So I'll skip to the Alameda Well water line. This was a water line connecting Alameda Well to Ortega groundwater treatment plant, and that was finished last year. As you know, we completed the aquifer storage and recovery, or the ASR pilot project last year. And we have our automated metering infrastructure program that was rolled out to our customers in March of 2024. And I wanted to provide an update on that. The last time that this map was presented to you was in September of this year. So now this includes December data. We have a total registration rate for all of our accounts of 49%. It's really impressive. And then if we just look at residential accounts, we have 50% of all residential water accounts that are registered. And this map is showing in the blue circles, it's showing the percent of residential registered accounts as compared to the total available residential accounts per census tract. And then that's laid over that poverty prevalence indicator, where the red and orange areas show census tracts with higher instances of poverty. And in September, our lowest registration rate was 37%, and then that one has since moved to 42%. And so that's our as a citywide, our lowest registration is 42%, which I think is really impressive. So we see a lot of community engagement. Next, we'll go into groundwater. As a reminder, groundwater is conjunctively used with other supplies. So when we have a lot of surface water, we don't use groundwater. We let the basins rest and recover. And then we have groundwater available for times of drought, and that's when we see our higher pumping. And groundwater is also an important hyper-local supply and can be used as an emergency supply. The city has 2 groundwater basins. So Foothill Basin is in green, more towards the top of the map, and Santa Barbara Basin is in blue. And then within those basins, we have 3 storage unit areas, and those are in the dashed black lines. Santa Barbara has storage unit 1 and storage unit 3, and then Foothill has its own named storage unit area. And we also have 7 production wells, and those are labeled on the map in white. There are 2 in Foothill and 5 in storage unit 1. The Foothill Basin, there are 2 main pumpers in the basin. That's the city and then Lake Cachuma Mutual Water Company. We estimate that the multi-year drought yield is a little over 8,000 acre feet, and that's from a 2018 USGS modeling study. And we do expect to be back early next year with an updated study to present to you. Our total production in Foothill was 62 acre feet, and that was all pumping as part of the San Roque ASR pilot. And there's no planned pumping for the next 3 water years. And our estimating remaining yield is 3,800 acre feet. And water levels continue to recover, which we'll look at in the next couple of slides. This is showing the historical groundwater levels and pumping at Foothill. And starting from 1980 to 2024, the squiggly lines are all of the Foothill monitoring wells, and that's showing their water surface elevation. And then at the bottom is the pumping data, so that relates to the right-hand scale. And green is Lake Cachuma pumping, and then red is the total city pumping. So I have a circle here in the graph to look at the last part of this. As pumping ended at the end of 2017, you can see the water levels start to go up. And this graph shows the same scale as the one previously. This is just drilling into the last 10 years. And I thought it's an interesting graph to see the end of the pumping in 2017, and then you can really see how those levels just start to recover. And I also think it's interesting to look at the reaction in San Roque well to the ASR pilot. So San Roque well line there is more bold blue line, and you can see how it reacts to the injection into the pumping. And total injections last year were 41 acre feet. And again, our total pumping was 62 acre feet, and then total pumping from Lake Cachuma was 157 acre feet. So moving into storage unit 1, the city's multi-year drought yield is assumed to be a little bit above 16,000 acre feet, and that's again from that same USGS study. We had 0 acre feet production last year, and our estimating remaining yield is 9,680 acre feet. We have no planned pumping in the next 3 water years, and at this in this storage unit, the monitoring wells have really recovered. Is from a groundwater level point of view. Many of the wells are actually in artesianing mode. So today we're just going to be looking at the seawater intrusion monitoring. Our chloride monitoring wells are in red on this map. And then there are 2 fairly close production wells here, Veracruz and City Hall production well. And then El Estero Water Resource Center is on the map for context. And the first monitoring well we'll look at is closest to the ocean there. It's by Cabrillo Palm Park. This is showing the chloride levels at that Cabrillo Palm Park well from 1986 to 2024. And as you can see, the chloride levels do go up when we pump. And we largely stopped pumping at this well again in 2017, and then there was some pumping in 2023. The average levels since 2020 are about 9,500 milligrams per liter. And for context, I did add the local ocean water chloride on here. That's about 19,350 milligrams per liter. And our latest read is a little over 8,000 milligrams per liter. So the levels are going down. And then recovery will be when those levels drop to less than 6,000 milligrams per liter.
I think once we hit that point, I think that's what we've been talking about internally, we would start up some type of safe yield production. So taking advantage of that local water source to utilize it without, again, compromising and our ability to be responsive during a drought.
And then the next chloride monitoring well to look at is further inland, and this is next to El Estero. At this well, chloride levels are much lower, and this is the same scale as the first graph that I showed, just so we can really compare those chloride wells. So again, this is showing levels from 1986 to this September. The average levels since 2020 are 890 milligrams per liter. And recovery at this well, we would consider it recovered when chlorides drop to less than 200 milligrams per liter. And moving on to the final monitoring well, this is just on the other side of the 101, near the intersection of Palm Avenue and Garden. And we do not want to see chlorides at this well. And I'm happy to report that we still do not see elevated chlorides at this well, so we can conclude that seawater intrusion has not reached this far inland. And the chlorides levels at this well range from 25 to 100 milligrams per liter. Our latest read was just under 100 at 98.7. And storage unit 3 has difficult water quality. We use this as needed to supplement the recycled water system. And the estimated safe yield is about 200 acre feet per year. We did not use this well last year, and there are no plans to use this well in the next 3 years. And that brings us to the recommendation. I ask that Water Commission recommend that Council approve and adopt the City of Santa Barbara Water Supply Management Report for the 2024 water year, finding that the groundwater resources are in long-term balance in accordance with the conjunctive management element of the city's enhanced urban water management plan.
Thank you. Any comments or questions?
Great presentation, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Just a question on storage unit 3, why is there challenging water quality?
Just the geology in that area is really high in hydrogen sulfide. And when we turn it on, it smells like rotten eggs, and we get a lot of complaints. And so part of our challenge there is trying to figure out how to sequester it. And we add a lot of chlorine that does help sequester it. It also is high in manganese and iron as well. So none of that is a health issue. It is more just, it's hard on equipment and kind of offensive to neighbors.
Offensive.
Really. Offensive water. Yeah. The smelly water. Yeah.
Is there any public comment on this item?
Chair Snyder, we have no speakers for public comment.
So we'll move to recommendation.
I move to approve the recommendation.
Second.
Commissioner Davis,
Yes.
Commissioner Cooney,
Yes.
Vice Chair Keller,
Yes.
Chair Snyder.
Yes.
If it was warm, it would make a great mineral hot springs, right? That's what we could charge. Yeah, right? Just heat it up.
Thank you, Ms. Showers.
All right, thanks.
And so next we'll move on to the Water Resource Manager's report.
All right, Chair Snyder, Commissioners, Council Liaison Snedden. I didn't have anything to point out in this. I didn't think the information was fairly consistent, but did want to note a few things here. I wanted to introduce our new wastewater system manager, Thomas Welch, who is here. Yeah, he's jumping right in. We had our staff holiday gathering yesterday, and he got to make some remarks to everyone, and I think the team is really excited to see him. And did want to note, we did a national recruitment for that, and Thomas came out flying colors, and appreciate Chair Snyder's participation in those interviews, so thank you. We are turning right around. We have an advertisement out right now for a wastewater treatment superintendent. And then wanted to point out that desal is back online with one intake pump, and we've got a second intake pump hopefully arriving in early January. The Los Alturas, you may recall that landslide up there. We have a contractor mobilized right now, and they are doing directional drilling to install a sewer main in the street. Following that, there'll be some work to shore up this street so that the landslide doesn't take out the street. And then the final phase of that will be to work with, I think there's 3 property owners that we're going to need to put in private pump stations to pump up to the street. So still working through that. Really excited to report that we completed our lab audit. This was a huge undertaking. Our lab staff were under immense pressure. There was a lot of follow-up questions from the auditor, and we recently got confirmation that we've passed with flying colors, so we'll be submitting for our renewal certification, so big deal there. I wanted to report out that we are losing a really senior staff person, Raymond Lopez. He's been a lead for us for a long time. He has 21 years of service. He is in his early 40s. He lives here in the city. He grew up here. He loves working here. But Goleta was just offering him something he just couldn't turn down. I mean, we are 25% below the market, and that's just kind of things that just drive me crazy. So we're celebrating him today after work, but just want to recognize, it's funny because I actually sat across from the table with Ray when he started, just out of high school, working here, working on math so that he can pass his first certifications. And anyway, he is, the team really rallies around Ray. He has just kind of been that person, especially in emergencies. He's really responsive. And so really disappointed to lose him. And unfortunately, the other factor that goes with him is Ray is highly appreciated. And so with him is a potential to lose other staff because I think Ray knows we've got some great people here. He trained them. So anyway, we'll be looking to try and fill those shoes. That's going to be very difficult for us. And then lastly, I will be unavailable for the January Water Commission meeting, and Dakota has agreed to step up and fill in, and I really appreciate that. And with that, I just wanted to wish you all happy holidays, and thank you for all your support this year. It's been a long year and some long meetings, and I do apologize for those, but we really appreciate all of your input and support on behalf of all of our staff. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Joshua. And congratulations again, Mr. Welch. All right. Any public comment before we close out?
Chair Snyder, we have no speakers for public comment.
All right, we'll adjourn this
Oh,
meeting.
wait, hold on. Don't adjourn yet, sorry. Can I just make a comment request on, just over this year, we've heard so many impacts of us not being competitive with our nearby neighbors. This isn't a matter of people having to commute or go very far to have better offers. And I think just the cumulative effect of hearing about these over and over again, Raymond, we're going to miss you tremendously. I think it's time for the Water Commission, I mean, I don't direct this agenda at all, but I think it's time for the Water Commission to direct its own assessment of what is needed in the staffing. We've seen very clearly all the capital improvements that are needing to be done. These are citywide issues. This is community safety, resilience. There are many, many reasons why this needs to be elevated. And when we couldn't hold on to engineers, we made emergency decisions to increase those salaries. Not enough still, but I think it is outside maybe of the class and comp, even though that's happening and we respect the process. I'm not confident that it is going to clearly reflect all that's needed. So I'm liaison here, not a voting member, but I think it would be really welcome to council to have an assessment of really what's needed, because we're hemorrhaging. And I think in this department in particular, we need sort of emergency measures to stop the bleed, frankly. So thank you for all you do, to keep things running in a really thin staff environment, and thank you to staff for working so overtime. But I think the time has come to really sound the alarm and elevate this.
Oh, well, Madam Chair, to that point, I was curious, could we agendize an item to have that discussion early in the next year?
I'd be happy to bring the item back. I'll have to give some good conversation with our chair about exactly how to bring that back and what that looks like. But if I were to infer here, looking to assist with kind of what are the stats of how much turnover we're experiencing, because we do have a lot of OITs, so people who really don't have the certifications for the job, but we're training them to train. I think we're up to 8 people right now who are currently trying to work into certifications. And we can talk about that, and then potentially maybe a letter from the Water Commission to the council.
I think that would be helpful. So
Okay.
I'd move that we bring that back.
Second.
Okay.
And I think if we could, just to add a little bit more on that, so something around the turnover and retention, but also I hear you say these stats about kind of how under we are compared to other local agencies. If that could be something that's formally presented, I think that would be really helpful as well.
The motion basically is to bring back an assessment of staff capacity, turnover, and retention.
Okay. Joshua, do I do a vote? Sure. Okay, sorry. Commissioner Davis,
Yes.
Commissioner Cooney,
Yes.
Vice Chair Keller,
Yes.
Chair Snyder.
Yes. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah.
And I want to thank Chair Snyder for the donuts.
Yes,
Great idea.
on the record.
Okay, well then, with that, I think we can adjourn. Thank you, and we'll see everyone on January 16th. Have a great holiday.
Thank you.